Good morning. Today it's my pleasure to welcome Julienas Galt with me. He is a crypto YouTuber who founded the channel Swissborg Mania in 2020 that now has over 11,000 subscribers. With him, we're going to talk about quality of life, crypto, investing, but also we're going to discover a little bit about what hides behind this mysterious character. So first of all, Julien, thank you for joining us, for giving some of your time. How are you feeling this morning? Well, to tell you the truth, we had a terrible night. But we're doing okay. We're still smiling. Everything's going well in life. But it was truly a hectic night. Okay, so you didn't sleep much. Yes, we were regularly interrupted in our sleep and we had to be reactive. Well, I'm sure you dealt with it very well, and I'm all the more appreciative that you took some time to be with us this morning instead of sleeping in. It is my pleasure. So I wanted to start with a very general question, because often when we talk about crypto, investing, oftentimes they might say, well, I'm not interested in investing in money. They don't have an understanding that it's a means to an end. Let's talk about what this end might be. And I'd like to know, for you personally, what does quality of life mean? What has value in life, according to you? That is an excellent question. For me, quality of life means freedom. And when we talk about freedom, a lot of people refer to different things. But for me, it means to be free to do what I want, to do what I want with my property, with what I own. And often on a daily basis, we can feel that we are not fully free, even if we're in a country like France, as is my case. It's not so much our obligations, but it's as soon as we try to do something special, try to be entrepreneurs, they take a piece of us because there's an entire system at work that taxes a little bit here and there. And as soon as you try to set something up, you immediately feel a presence on our backs, which can be quite heavy. And for me, quality of life means to be able to remove that weight, to extract oneself from that weight, so to speak, and to be able to leave from that weight and pressure. And I've tried it and I realized that leaving is not always easy, and to leave and to have a quality of life that's the same as what we would have in France, well, you need funds, you need capital. So there you have it. For me, quality of life means to be able to get rid of these weights on our shoulders while obviously having enough to eat, sleep, take care of ourselves and our loved ones, and to enjoy life. But we have to do that freely. When you say leave, you mean to leave the country. Geographically speaking, it's a physical displacement, departure. Ideally, I would like to do this while staying here in France. But somehow I have to distance myself from the state. It's not quite feasible. And alternatives would be to leave to go to a freer country, or maybe to start down the road of becoming a digital nomad, and to be like a butterfly going here and there to not be prosecuted. It's like Gerard Depardieu, who left the country, who left France. He's an expat now and washes his hands of things in France. I imagine that when you talk about to do what we want with our freedom, with our property, you also include our time, which might be the thing that has most value. Yes, but right now I've pretty much reached that level. I'm pretty much doing what I want to do with my time. So for me, it really involves just continuing to do what I do and to try to do it without all these constraints over which I have no control, really. It's not like in Switzerland where you're regularly asked for your opinion. Yes, that's true. It's different where I live in Switzerland, where we are regularly consulted, and actually I have to put an envelope in the mail with respect to a recent vote. My next question. So can we say that your interest in crypto comes from the fact that you think it's the best way to reach these goals of freedom, to get rid of this burden, and so on and so forth? Is that the case? Well, I'm interested in crypto because I realized through different readings and experiences that I had, and back in the day I was also very interested in political philosophy, and these notions of free societies. And I realized that Bitcoin might be one way to reach those goals. Some people came for the money, but I really came for the philosophical side of things. So I came for the philosophy, but I stayed for the money. I came in thinking that Bitcoin is the only asset that cannot be seized, that cannot be confiscated. If I have it on my wallet and I understand the security protocols of my wallet, the state will never be able to come and get it against my will. And this is true. It works. I can send it to whomever I want. And that is where you can find freedom with one's Bitcoin, because you can do whatever you want with them. Nobody can stop me. And nobody can tell me what to do. Obviously, there's a network, and when I transfer a Bitcoin, fragments of Bitcoin are taken as a commission so that the network can live. But that's part of the rules of the game that I accept. And after that, it's up to me to make the transaction at the right time. But I can well and truly send it to whoever I want, whenever I want. Okay, it's interesting. You started from the philosophical side, and then you stayed for the money, as you said. And this ties well into your intro where you talked about getting rid of that burden. Currently, only 7% of the world's population has crypto. In France, we're talking about 20% of adults. So there's a huge majority that still has to discover this asset class. I'm going to speak a little bit about how I got into crypto, which is similar though to yours, but I didn't go in as much depth. So I started with the bull run in 2020 and 2021, where a lot of people got interested, and the person who opened this idea to me were the presentations from Michael Saylor. I'll put a link to one in the description. He provides very basic descriptions, very clear-cut, structured descriptions and explanations, and it's through him that I understood that Bitcoin has all these positive sides. It's got a critical mass. It's over half of the total crypto valuation. Its age and track record is established every 5 years. It increases in value. And when Michael Saylor explains that the chairman of the SEC considered it a commodity, in other words, within Security and Exchange Commission, an authority in the United States says that it's a commodity on the same level as an oil barrel. To me, it really opened my eyes, because we're talking about a digital asset, and so long as it was completely digital, it was hard to grasp. But no, it's digital, but it's also very real. There are only 21 million units of this asset, and nobody will be able to change that. So for me, there was really a before and an after, so to speak. And I really embrace his explanations, and it's an excellent base layer on which other things can be built. But if I'm completely honest, the rest of the CRISPO universe is a bit beyond me. There are two separate worlds in my mind. There's Bitcoin, which I've understood quite well, which is already a step, and it's relatively complicated. And the rest is separate. I follow your channel, and I love what you do. But I have to say that oftentimes your explanations are slightly over my head. And if we look at what happens in markets, I think it's similar to the story of the emperor's new clothes. There are a lot of people who sell pipe dreams precisely because the subject matter is so complex. And then they use this to take advantage of people who are less knowledgeable, who jump on the bandwagon. So that's the basis from which I started in crypto. Do you agree in general with what I've said? What would you add to this first layer? Yes, I definitely agree that on the one side there's Bitcoin and then there's everything else as far as crypto goes. And yes, Michael Saylor, if you haven't heard this name before, please look him up. He is somebody who's well and truly exceptional. He puts his money where his mouth is, and it's brave. He also does a lot of promoting for Bitcoin. I started my journey with Andreas Antonopoulos, who goes into the details of Bitcoin a little bit more, and he was already asking himself questions 10 years ago as to what would happen if the US government wanted to block Bitcoin, and what would happen if this and that situation were to emerge. So he was the first one to give lectures on Bitcoin, and at the time there were only 3 or 10 people in the room. He was really one of the first to speak about this technology to a broader audience. So yes, we definitely need to draw a distinction between Bitcoin, which can be considered digital gold, which has all the qualities of scarcity, but on top of the scarcity that gold has, which has its shortcomings because we don't know all the gold reserves on Earth, and there are doubtless asteroids with gold, so we don't have a finite gold supply as far as mankind is concerned. And maybe we'll be able to make more gold chemically one day. But when we talk about Bitcoin, it's a mathematical limit. The 21 million you mentioned will never be reached. And there will always be a little bit more to be mined, and much, or rather, some has already been lost. So the 21 million is a hard mathematical border limit. And this creates scarcity, and scarcity brings value so long as there are people who want this Bitcoin. Bitcoin could have been the only blockchain, but its founders, Satoshi Nakamoto, had a roadmap for this, and other things have been developed. But then Vitalik Buterin came along, and he wanted to go faster, and he wanted to implement with Bitcoin what we call smart contracts. These contracts allow us to do more things than just send money. And this Ethereum blockchain allowed things to be programmable. And so Ethereum arrived. But maybe I should go back and explain that before the Ethereum era, there was an altcoin era, which were alternatives to Bitcoin. Because what makes Bitcoin's strength is its open source nature. And therefore it is easy to copy. And that's used to be a major criticism. Well, I can't have more than 21 million Bitcoins, but I can create a Bitcoin copy, and I can have a second Bitcoin. But what's more important than the 21 million in and of itself is the consensus supported by the community that this is the asset that counts. And since we're dealing with computers and code, it's easy to establish whether you're on the right code or not. So it was this multiplication of alternatives, so to speak, of Bitcoin. We had Bitcoin Cash, we had Bitcoin Satoshi Vision. We've had others. We've had many during a whole cycle. There was an outstanding number of these assets. But the only one that survived this competition was Bitcoin, because to beat Bitcoin, you had to have a better value proposition. And in fact, all the alternative propositions were worse. And so in fact, if it is where it is today, and representing over 50% of the critical mass of the crypto market, it's because it killed all its competitors, not because it was aggressive, but simply because people said to themselves, that's where we find real value and alternatives cannot survive. Sooner or later, when people were sent Bitcoin Cash, people would sell it to buy real Bitcoin. And so once we've understood that Bitcoin beat all other digital money that wanted to be the new gold and so forth, we started on the second revolution with Ethereum, which wanted to generate these smart contracts. And this is a kind of collective group supercomputer where we make machines work to execute small contracts, small computer programs. And this opens a broad field of innovation, even more than what we had before, because with a computer you can do much more than with a gold bar. You can trade small fragments of gold and of Bitcoin, but when we're talking about a computer, we can well and truly do incredible things. So obviously we had a similar phenomenon as with Bitcoin. There were a lot of alternatives to Ethereum, which also explained a previous cycle where we had Polkadot, Solanas, so on and so forth. So the battle as to which mega computer wins isn't over. There is uncertainty as to whether Ethereum will win. Solana is fighting tooth and nail. And there might be a new blockchain. It might emerge to take that role also. So there's still a war being waged there. And it's the people who will decide, the users. And obviously, there could also be 2 or 3 of these supercomputers competing or working together. That's not a problem. Things work very well like that even today. And there are techniques to go from one computer to another, to make these computers speak to each other. And that's what I mentioned in my channel. These are the famous bridges that allow us to go from one to the other. So when we understand Bitcoin and then these supercomputers, then there's the next layer of everything that can be built on this structure. And here I talk about these tokens. Let me interrupt you. When you talk about a supercomputer, you're talking about Ethereum. Yes, exactly. I'm talking about Ethereum, Solana, Polkadot. These are supercomputers, just to simplify things, on which you can build small programs. And that's when, as I was saying, the tokens arrive. They don't have their own blockchain, and they are built on another blockchain. And here, we find ourselves in a more standard business entrepreneurial setting. There is a group of people, founders, who think, well, this technology is going to allow me to do something more efficiently than how things work today, because a blockchain makes things traceable. There is a history of blocks in the blockchain that will enable me to save money and provide a better service to my users. Furthermore, I'm going to use this network effect that started with Facebook, Google, and so forth. It can be quite challenging to start something and get a large critical mass. But thanks to crypto and these tokens that are built on the blockchains I mentioned, we can encourage people to use your service, and this allows us to reach 50,000, a million people rather quickly who can start to participate and use the project. So the tokens that you find on these blockchains, they depend a great deal on the founders, the teams they work with. And yes, it's true, sometimes we find founders that are crooks. They might break promises. There might also be technical problems that might be intentional or not. Some people are dishonest, and so you have to be careful. And we're talking about software, and whenever you talk about software, well, not everybody is an expert, and they might slip in a little back door, and when they're fed up, they say, well, I'll just siphon out the funds. This has happened. And here we're faced with the fact that the crypto universe, when we talk about this token part, is no more or less than a standard entrepreneurial setup with a broader access throughout the world. And therefore, we find the same shortcomings and problems that we find in markets everywhere. And it's not because there were 10 or 100 crooks or scammers that we shouldn't trust it. You need to do your own research, and this is what takes time. And you need to know what you're doing in case you might not trust something. Why do we tell people to go on Bitcoin? Well, because with Bitcoin, there is trust. Everybody who's done their research and has taken a bit of time to ask themselves questions, they can say we can go in with our eyes closed. With Ethereum, with Solana, it's pretty much the same thing. It will never fall to zero. And everything that is built on top of that, well, that's different. So that's how I see things. And then there's an entire phenomenon of projects where there are no fundamentals whatsoever, no fundamental values, but it works. These are called meme coins. And there, the team behind it doesn't actually have a vision, and it works like a big joke. And it's quite incredible, but when enough people laugh at a joke and believe in it, well, then it takes a value of its own. But that can easily drop to zero if people stop believing in the joke. And it's not an actual Ponzi scheme, so to speak, because it's written black on white that it's not serious. It's like an explicit Ponzi scheme. Yes, exactly. So long as people believe in it, it'll work. But as soon as the joke ceases to be funny, well, yeah, so you need to leave ahead of others. Earlier, you used the expression smart contract. It's a notion that I've always had trouble grasping. I've seen examples where they say you buy a plane ticket, but the money is only paid once you arrive at your destination and you're satisfied. Could you maybe explain this notion of smart contracts? Yes. Basically, it's a computer program that says if this event happens, then this other thing will also happen as a consequence. It's an if this, then that logic. And it's quite easy to see a very simple smart contract that also works on Bitcoin, which is why I said earlier that everything could have been done with Bitcoin, but we decided to speed things up and leave Bitcoin aside and create a supercomputer blockchain to do these things. Crypto works with blockchain, so there's a block number 1, 100, 1,000, and so regularly blocks are being made. And a very simple example is to say, I'll send you 1 Bitcoin or 1 ETH when we reach block 254,000. So there's a condition. When this block emerges, then the money goes. The Ether goes, the Bitcoin goes. So there we're talking about something that's intrinsic to the blockchain. Inevitably, if there are still miners and people who work on the project, that block will emerge and you'll receive your money. And yes, we can use this in the insurance system. We often talk about airline insurance as an example, because there's a piece of data that's not in the blockchain, that's on the outside, and it has to be brought in. So it's not the blockchain as such purely, it's people we trust that entered information that your plane arrived, and if your plane did not arrive, well, we'll have information from the airport, from the people who might have been on the plane saying that the plane didn't arrive. So there will be a range of different information sources that can be gathered, and so we can tell the insurance company, in fact, that plane did not arrive on time, so this person had insurance, and the condition was if the plane does not arrive on time or 30 minutes after the scheduled time, he or she should be paid the insurance value. That solves a problem we have today in our world around us, which is often dubbed the 2.0 and crypto is 3.0. I won't go down that rabbit hole, but when you're in our world and you have a problem with a plane, you have to go to the airport quickly, ask for a document to prove that the plane didn't arrive on time. Then you have to send a piece of paper with all these supporting documents. You'll have to send it quickly before a deadline. And then you'll have somebody who'll receive it, who'll say, yes, I received this. There'll be a checklist and look at all your documents. And then they'll also check whether you actually paid. Have they paid their premium? Isn't there a little loophole somewhere that will prevent him from receiving his money? Because somewhere my job as an insurance agent is to not overpay. So once you have all of this, you might receive your money in a month. But with this 3.0 system, everything was checked beforehand. And as soon as it's triggered, you receive your payment. That's a great example. Because in that example, we are released from all of those headaches that users have to go through. On the other hand, maybe the employer will have to hire fewer people because you will not be using that human interface. But I think I interrupted you. Did you have something else to add? No, it is indeed a striking example. And we can give many examples like it. And let's just remember that a smart contract is basically an if this happens, then that will happen equation. And you can program anything along these lines. And when a smart contract is deployed, and this is an interesting idea, it's in the cloud, it's in the blockchain, it's universally available, it could have been there for several blocks, and then pretty much anyone can say, I have to say this contract is visible, there's a website, you connect yourself and you say, I want to use this insurance. You choose your criteria and it will be created, but it's basically accessible to everyone. There are no rules such as, well, you're in this country, it won't work. The cloud is universal. And that's quite powerful. That means that anyone can join this insurance. Yes, but when it comes to implementation in the 2.0 world, this contract will have to be accepted by local jurisdictions. So people have access, but it won't be recognized locally, won't it? Well, in fact, that's where the magic happens. The smart contract, if it's well coded, once it's deployed and people know the rule, it cannot be violated. The rule is set. It's a promise. And if you want to use it, you will connect and you will send your insurance money, your premium. And then it's set. And no judge can delete a smart contract. It's the creator of the smart contract that could do this. And that's why we've had people that destroy keys to destroy smart contracts. We had that with a system called Tornado Cash, which allowed us to have a little bit more privacy with Bitcoin transactions, and which allowed us to send money with more anonymity. And these people published their stuff, and it was deleted, and they were prosecuted, but the program could not be touched. Whether it be the US, Europeans, you can pursue individuals, but not the contract itself. You can't attack the program, you can attack individuals. Yes, as I was asking the question, I realized that I was thinking still in a 2.0 mode. I was thinking, yes, there are these smart contracts, I need to go through a judge. But no, since it's a smart contract in the cloud, it's automatic. And you don't need this sort of external validation. Yes, it's been programmed upstream what will trigger the reimbursement, the payment, the service, what have you. There are still some issues regarding how that data will arrive in the blockchain as to, for example, if the plane landed on time. And there we're still trusting some companies or some groups of individuals that do this, and then this is also a more complicated technical matter. But we make sure that there are several incoming information streams to confirm the fact, not just insurance companies saying that it didn't arrive, because they might always say, oh, the plane was always on time. Things also are different depending on the context. In Europe, we have certain protections when it comes to travel, and these therefore would be smart contracts that could be used only in the European space that have these rights. Somebody in Africa could sign on to that insurance, but since they have a different legal framework for Africa, it would be different. Well, everything is possible. Once a smart contract exists, once it's launched, normally we pay for insurance that we're going to be using. If you're not going to board the plane, you're not going to pay for travel insurance for that trip. So if someone in Africa wants to use the service, well, they'd have to board a relevant plane, which is entirely possible, obviously. And I think it's much fairer to have this service not bound to individual's nationality, but to the actual user. Yes, obviously, anybody who might be flying in Europe with European protections. Yes, of course. These are disruptors who are going to deal the cards of the system anew, so to speak. And this will probably lead to cheaper insurance, will be more efficient. And I think people will actually hire more insurance than they do today because of this. An issue I wanted to address with you is this idea of quick and easy riches, of overnight wealth. I think often men, especially young men, they hear about crypto, they hear about the different fortunes that were made so quickly, and they think that crypto investments will be the way towards financial freedom, what we touched on at the beginning. And I think it's important to bring in some context. I like what Warren Buffett said when he was addressing young people, telling them that the foundation has to be to have something of value that you can offer on the job market. And then thanks to that, you'll have a space to breathe, you'll be able to save. One shouldn't think as a teenager that I'm going to outsmart the market, I'll figure out how to invest better than others, and that'll be my exit strategy. Would you agree with this? I agree that to make money, to make a lot of money, you need to already have money. That's the foundation. Money doesn't grow on trees, neither does Bitcoin. And so you have to start somewhere. And so obviously the most straightforward way of setting money aside is to get a job and then to not spend it all. And not spending it all isn't necessarily easy. Sometimes we live hand to mouth, but it's a mindset shift, which is quite a challenge. But I know that when I discovered Bitcoin, I was so enthusiastic that I told myself, I'm going to live the life of a monk for months. And I ate a lot of potatoes. I ate a lot of mashed potatoes. That's okay. I love mashed potatoes. But basically what I'm trying to say is that my state of mind had changed so much that for me, every euro spent had to be a very conscious choice because I wanted to save as much as possible. And I managed to save money. I stopped certain subscription services. I went on the warpath to accumulate as many and as much savings as possible. So that's the first step. Without wages, without a salary, what could I have set aside? Not much. That's clear. I also think it's important to highlight that you need to be constant in your savings. You can't think, oh, as soon as I've set aside 500 euros, I'll stop. No, you have to do this on a regular basis. You have to be consistent. Because it's very difficult to enter the market at a low point. We all hope that we're going to be the best and enter at the low point in the market. But if you manage to do it, it'll be pure luck. And then there is this idea, and I'm going to change cap because for 15 years I used to be a financial advisor. I worked for a big bank, and I took care of people who had a lot of money in the bank. I told them that they would diversify. I gave them a little economics course because you might be 40 years old, for example, and when you visit your banker will either tell you, well, this is what you should buy, period, or you can be lucky and find somebody who explains to you how things work. So I was the latter. And the first rule, apart from the fact that that money does not grow on trees, and it's not free unless you receive subsidies, maybe. The money that you make with the money that you have depends on the risk that you run, the risk that you take. Everything that makes money is because there is risk attached to it. That's the rule. Because if it could bring in a lot of money without any risk, then everybody would do it. And we're human, and obviously the returns would diminish as more people would join. So that's why we're still lucky in crypto, because as you said at the beginning, there's a huge percentage of the population that has no crypto. And above all, the people who have some crypto don't have crazy amounts in it. There are some, you mentioned Michael Saylor, Elon Musk, that have made huge bets. But we're talking about a handful. And yes, this is a bet, this is speculation, which might lead to make money, but it makes money precisely because we believe that this token, and you need to choose the right one, will be adopted by more people, this network effect. And if we are right, then we can generate handsome ROIs that will reflect the general market enthusiasm and uptake. So that's why some people say Bitcoin will one day be worth millions, because it's going to replace the US dollar, euros, Swiss francs. It'll even replace gold bullion, and that's a lot of value. But it's precisely because that path is not certain today that there is this growth potential. But what we're thinking might happen, might not happen. And there's risk. And we might keep dollars, yens, and euros. Yes, maybe we should have mentioned at the beginning that you have 15 years of experience in wealth management. It definitely adds to your cred, but we'll talk about this again at the end of the show. I think we all know people who, in a moment of enthusiasm, put a lot of money and got burned, might have lost a lot of it because they didn't have what you explained and a more long-term vision, being consistent and so forth. And I believe you need to have a predictable revenue stream one way or another, apart from crypto. Yes, you have to understand that if you think a project is going to make you risk, it is intrinsically because it is not broadly recognized and there is a risk. You need to take that on board. And here we're setting aside our initial risk where there might be technology issues and there might be bugs. That's something that's pretty much been set aside. In 2017, 2018, people could still ask themselves, will Bitcoin still be around in 2 years? That is no longer the case. That's not a question anymore. Everyone says now that Bitcoin will be around in 5, 10 years and more. But as we were saying, there's Bitcoin and then there's everything else. With Bitcoin, the value proposition, that's good. For me, the risk is pretty much at the same level as gold, and gold itself fluctuates quite a bit. But once you've taken that step and you start believing that and understanding that the future is Bitcoin, when you want to outperform Bitcoin, that's when you go on these smaller initiatives. And there is where risk emerges. Who are the people behind this crypto token? How do they behave with respect to their communities? Are they providing a useful service? And you start thinking about it as, is it a valuable company? Does it have promise? Does it claim to be the replacement of Booking.com? Do they have a chance? And if that is the case, well, is this going to translate to the token having value? And that's when you go into a different analysis. They might not be successful because there are other competitors. On that market, they already have 3 or 4 competitors. So what are their chances of winning? All the sectors that crypto is trying to disrupt already exist. So they're going to have to be really strong and add some serious added value to convince old customers that are using Web 2 to switch to Web 3. But if you bet on the right horse, you can make multiples, and then you have to be smart and get out at the right time. Because there are moments of euphoria in markets, just like with the dot-com bubble. At one point, the media talks about it, everybody wants to buy, it goes up, and you can't make the mistake of going in at that time. You need to leave at that time. But to be able to leave at that time, you need to have entered earlier. Yes, and any wealth manager would say that both in the entry and the exit, you need to do this in a staged way and not in one go. So with this broad understanding of what crypto means to you, there's Bitcoin, and then there's the Ethereums and the Solanas, and then the tokens on top of that layer. At that level, it's pretty much like any company that wants to raise funds. And so this brings me to the next question. If somebody is lucky enough to be able to save, put some money aside and invest, why are these crypto options more attractive than real estate, than Apple shares, or gold? Or would you suggest diversifying? Well, I diversify in quite a few things. I don't have any gold because I've migrated directly to Gold 2.0, even though in the app that I use, they have what they called a product that has both gold and Bitcoin, and they transition from one to the other. Right now it's much more heavy Bitcoin, but there's some gold in it nevertheless. What explains why there's greater potential is because it's not mature. Apple is a growth system. You talked about a tech company. It creates new products, and on that basis, it tries to reach new users, but it's so big that it's hard for it to grow. But when you start with a small company that raised 20 million or 50 million, 15 million, there is far greater growth potential, but it remains potential. It has to be realized. And it's the same thing with real estate. New buildings are being built, but it's hard to grow it. The value of real estate comes from people's incomes. If things are more expensive in London than in Paris, it's because they're wealthier, they pay less taxes. In Switzerland, it's very expensive because people can afford it. If you go to a poor country, well, real estate is cheap. So to bet on real estate is to believe that people's standard of living will increase. Otherwise, it'll simply grow in step with how construction goes, which can actually be quite negative. If they build a huge tower next to where you live, the supply explodes. It's not a place of scarcity. You can always build more housing. So when it comes to housing and real estate, I think that's the fight of an older generation, of a previous generation. I think it's interesting for us to have our primary residence be our own, to have purchased it. But for me, that's an old fight. And with all the retirees, and I wish them long life, but we'll have fewer people in Europe just because of demographics. And in 20 years, there's probably going to be a lot of property on the market. And if there's a lot of supply and not a lot of demand, the price will drop. And so the long-term bet on real estate, I really don't see it except for the basics of owning your own home. When it comes to stocks, it's just like crypto, except that it's already established. When you buy a stock of Total, it has less growth potential than a startup. All the cryptos we talk about today are startups, just like a 2.0 world startup. We are so early into the system that if it works, it can really pop. Yes, I'm quite direct in my questions because you yourself are super transparent with your holdings on your channel. You provide quarterly updates. And according to those updates, well, obviously you have a lot assigned to your main residence, but then almost everything is crypto. And when I was thinking about the questions to ask you, I thought that maybe what you would say is that in real estate, in Europe, you have access to more leverage, which could be interested in a medium and long-term horizon. But if we understand that crypto is the same as a startup that starts on a stock exchange, well, maybe it's pretty much the answer you just gave me. You believe, or you're more interested in crypto because there's more risk, but also more growth potential. Yes, and then for me, things are a bit different because I spend all my time watching what's going on in crypto. It's almost like the boss of a company who knows his company and says, well, no, I'm going to leave my cash in the company, reinvest in my company because he knows it inside out. And when you ask a question to the boss, he might have all his money in his company, but he doesn't get the impression he's running a huge risk because he sees its profitability and he knows his sector inside out. And when you've been in crypto for a long time, you have this vision, you have this understanding, you reinvest in what you believe, and you take time to follow current crypto events. So risk is reduced by the knowledge you have of the market. But in my allocation that I'm happy to share, I have no money in French style life insurance where you have a euro support, which is government debt, which yields a magnificent 2% when we have inflation at 3 or 4%. And where it's written in the fine print that if there's a liquidity problem, you won't be able to get your money out. And there's nothing easier for a government to say, well, this debt, because that's what this life insurance has, we'll just cancel the debt, and that means that my life insurance money is gone. So there are things like that where common sense might be to not have this 2% yield on something that can be confiscated and maybe just keep it on a current account within the limits of what a state might take from us. And there might be 100,000 cap. So in my allocation, there are things that are quite risky. That are exposed to black swan events. And for me, a black swan event would be something like the bankruptcy of states that only live because of ever increasing debt and the burden that everybody will start feeling. I might be more sensitive than others, but some are not yet or haven't yet felt it. And when they see that someday 60% of what they earn is going into state coffers for services that aren't up to scratch, at some point there's going to be a reaction. People are going to say, we can't go on like this. Already in France, we had a deficit that was supposed to be 3 or 4%, and now we're at 6%. So if they continue to do their accounts the way they do, it can go on for some time. They have different ways to steal money from us. But for me, that is too risky. So I prefer to be invested in certain other things rather than to expect that the government will manage their money well, or our money well. Yes, in Switzerland we have a slightly different retirement system, and I can't not have certain positions that are compulsory, but I do try to do things that are more promising, just like you. Yes, you're lucky to be in a funded retirement system and not a pay-as-you-go retirement system, because I'm paying for others, but nobody will be there to pay for me when my time comes. There are literally thousands of crypto assets, and we're not going to talk about all of them, obviously. But I wanted to talk about two that I know interest you. The first is the Galactica project. Could you explain what it's about for those who don't know it? Yes. Galactica is a project that creates a new blockchain. It's a blockchain that will be interoperable. This means that it can talk with Ethereum, Solana. It doesn't aspire to become a supercomputer which copies what Ethereum or Solana does, but it wants to bring together people's data. People will be able to share their data in what they call an IVM, an identity virtual machine. So basically, it's a mega computer to secure our identity. This identity will be built with a whole host of data that we'll be inputting. We'll be able to put in our financial data, put in our connection data to different sites, travel, people who play games can put this data in also, what I post to social networks, the fact that I pay my insurance premiums, all that stuff. And when one hears that, you might say, oh my God, he's putting all his personal data on a blockchain for everyone to see. So basically, everyone's going to see what he does. Now, obviously, that would be the case if we were on Ethereum or Solana, which are blockchains. With Galactica, we're going to be using a new technology, FHE, fully homomorphic encryption, and another technology, ZK proof, zero knowledge proof. These two technologies combined mean that you can encrypt information, the shared information completely. In other words, somebody looking on from the outside would only see code, incomprehensible numbers. And we can use that to, for example, justify special status. The example that I like to take is that of the municipal swimming pool. What's all this about? If you go to a pool today and you're entitled to a special rate, there are plenty of reasons to have a special rate. You can go to the cashier and say, I'm entitled to this rate. And the lady might say, well, prove it. And then you'll have to prove that you're disabled, for example. And it's always unpleasant to say, look, here I am. This is my document, or I have a large family, or I don't make much money. It's quite uncomfortable to be able to have to show to a municipal agent the reason for which you're entitled to a reduced rate. Now, obviously, they say, well, this is something that you showed at another stage. You have a card that proves your status, but at some stage you had to actually prove it. You had to show it. But with this Galactica system, the information will be shown to the person, but you're not going to show the information as such. You're going to be able to share encrypted data, the person will be able to check that it corresponds to the agreement to give you the freedom to enter at a reduced rate. And they'll say, yes, it's true, without knowing the reason. It might be because of a disability, because of a large family. They will not know the specific reason, but they'll have the information directly there with a flash code, and they can give the go-ahead. And there, you're sure of things. It's black and white. Either you pass or you don't, because you have this data. And you can put in a lot of data with this brand new technology, which did not exist at the dawn of Bitcoin. And this is something that's being developed with a company called Zama that had a Series A at the beginning of 2024. So once you have all this data, you'll be able to, on the one hand, be able to prove your identity. That's one of the problems with crypto today. You can create thousands of wallets, virtual wallets with one person behind them. But here, with all this data, you'll be able to identify anybody who creates two wallets, for example. And you'll be able to say, well, behind these two wallets, there's only one person, and it can reopen the possibilities and options for online democracy, where, people won't be able to vote twice. And this is something that happens often in democracies. You have a one man, one vote system. And in crypto, it's complicated. It's more often one token, one vote. So if you're very rich, you have more weight than someone who doesn't have as many tokens. So this is an interesting model for companies, because it's true that if you give greater decision-making power to somebody who has invested more money, it might make sense to give them more weight in the company. But when we talk about societies and what becomes law, then it's more interesting to have one man, one vote. So that's what Galactica is programmed to allow. And this will all be subject to our choice. I'll put this data on this blockchain. I'll create my profile, and then I can use this profile where I want. And what's powerful here is that people will be able to validate you with this profile. A company might want to check if this person pays his rent. Oh, and they see that, they've always paid their rent and they have a good financial score. Well, because of that, I will rent this Airbnb apartment to them for their vacations. So this will give information to the Airbnb host, but without divulging the details of my account, simply on the basis of a score. Or maybe they'll see that this is somebody who hasn't paid for 2 or 3 years. So when you start to grasp all that can be covered with this can open a large field of possibilities for new forms of state. And here I would invite those who are interested when it comes to new life opportunities to look at what Balaji wrote. He was the former CTO of Coinbase. He's written almost a novel on this topic. That's called The Network State. And he says that you don't actually need a territory. You don't need lands to create a new nation. We don't have to all gather geographically in this state or in any region. In fact, we can say, you, me, my brother, a guy that I don't know on the other side of the world, we have the same life project, we have the same ideal society. And for the time being, we're going to pool our financial resources, our time and energy for it to happen. And we'll start to organize together at an on-chain level. And we'll look for a place or many different places which would be decentralized around the world. And it would work according to the rules that we've decided by our votes. And this land might be purchased by you or me. I would still be the owner, but you'd be authorized to come in. Basically opens the door to the possibility of creating nations, micronations of discontinuous territory. And that's it. Galactica, by its infrastructure, will allow any group of people who say, well, we'd like to start this, get this ball rolling. They'll have this toolbox so they can have voting systems, pool resources, and so forth. So that's Galactica's big vision, to use this identity layer, this open source identity layer, that is compliant and also private, thanks to encryption. Yes, I was following you until, and I agreed until you talked about creating these new states. Maybe we need to find another word, because at the end you use the word compliant. Maybe I need to open my mind to this, but the only way I can see this happening would be if we're not talking about sovereign states, be they microstate or anything else. They would always be under the umbrella of the standard nation-state system with its rules and rules that have to be complied with. Well, when I was speaking and I talked about compliance and being compliant, it's because to create these decentralized states, that's the idealized vision of a service that's impossible today and that could be built through Galactica. But when I talked about compliant, it doesn't happen right at that stage. It has to do with the use of one's data. In much the same way you go to the public swimming pool without having to show your ID, you'd be saying that I'm going to use banking services, finance, so forth, through a wallet, through a crypto wallet, without revealing my identity. But the company that's providing the service knows that I'm not a terrorist, that it is not laundered money, and so forth, because it can check on the encrypted data. So when I talk about being compliant, it means that I respect the rule of law. And this is something that's completely coded into Galactica. But if the state tells me, you did something over there, but I'm not sure about things and I'd like to see your data, I, myself as the holder of the wallet, in 3 clicks, I can say, okay, to you alone, I'm going to share the data transparently, and you can confirm that I'm clean. And so I can use so-and-so bank, and if this bank has any doubt, they can see that the state gave me a green light. But the bank itself won't know my private data, only the state would know. And if I'm a real crook and I don't want to share information with the state because I've been a crook and I don't want to be identified, well then I will no longer have this authorization. I'll have a mark that says that he didn't share his data, and so bank will say you're no longer compliant and I can't work with you. That's the idea. Compliant has not to do with potential decentralized states. It has to do with the use cases that are compatible with Web 2, crypto, respecting those rules. Yes, I understand much better now. The second product I wanted to talk about is the one that gives its name to your channel, Swissborg Mania. Swissborg is a project based in Lausanne in the canton of Vaud here in Switzerland. I'm also a fan. I love how simple it is and its safety. But there's a lot of competition out there. And as I said earlier, we're still at the early days of crypto. Could you briefly explain once again what the project is about and why you're such a maniac, so enthusiastic about it? Well, yes. You have to understand that the crypto market emerged with platforms that allowed you to bring euros, Swiss francs, and buy cryptos. It works very much like a stock exchange. When you go on a platform like Binance, well, you get the feeling you're a trader. That's how it works. And so there are a lot of offers like that on the market. What Swissborg changes is we're trying to reproduce the banking experience, but with the ethos, the philosophy of crypto. And that is that you are the owner of your assets. In other words, the Bitcoin inside the app is well and truly mine. It's not the bank's. It's not Swissborg's. But in the current banking system, if you deposit 100 euros, it's no longer your 100 euros. It's that the bank owes you 100 euros. That's why it's called an IOU. The bank has a debt towards me. But with Swissborg, it's my money and it's clearly marked as my money. So that's the first thing. It's truly an experience that's different from the banking world and different from other crypto platforms, because there we're going to be building up our assets. We're going to be able to deposit our traditional currencies, to exchange them in 3 clicks, and we'll be able to keep our cryptos. But you can also send them outside the app. Not all apps allow for this. They can say that you can do it, but actually need to go back into euros or Swiss francs, which will mean that you incur fees. And the experience isn't the same. When you actually want to take your own Bitcoin out as Bitcoin, it's a different feeling, isn't it? And then we've said that we can buy them, sell them, but we can also make them grow on the inside. There are different services that are provided, different investments. For example, you can deposit 1 Ether, and at the end of the year, you might have 1.04. And this is done with real blockchain technology, with real financial products built on blockchain. It's not credit. And then there are also services that will enable you, for example, to save regularly, to be able to every day, every month, every week, depending on your energy and your desire to put a little money into a project, both to enter but also to exit. So it's really a platform to build your crypto assets, and the ethos of the house is that we're very community based. The shareholders and token holders are members of the community. I say we because I was at the start. I'm not a founder, but I was involved at the start, one of the first people to put money into this venture. And to my mind, it's pretty much cooperative. I see Swissborg as a cooperative crypto bank. It's so much a cooperative that it's what Swissborg does is whenever it generates profit, it reinvests it in the app so that it is the best app possible. We don't distribute dividends for the time being, but we can distribute some to token holders with different schemes. So it's really user-oriented. And so we are regularly asked to vote on how we're going to organize ourselves, which new tokens to list, voting on different redistribution of value. Yes, absolutely. I love that the app is secure, that our funds are segregated, and that they don't use our tokens for adventures, and it's clearly assigned to an individual. I also like the community centered aspect. But if I'm completely honest with you, I think that's all well and good, and maybe it's a start. But sometimes I feel, because yes, we have these votes, what to do with excess tokens, burn them, um, or other options, or to participate via the design of different emojis. Sometimes I feel it's a way of making people feel like they participate in a community, but these aren't really the heavy topics, the important issues that are to be addressed. Well, that's quite normal because we're still talking about a tech startup. For some time now, I am a part of the board of Swissborg. Congratulations, by the way, I voted for you. Yes, I'm just going to go a little bit back on this. So Swissborg opens its board of directors to the community, and there was the opportunity to vote for a candidate who met a certain number of criteria, to have invested in the structure, uses the platform, and so forth. And so it was the community that voted, and I presented myself as a candidate, and thanks to you and many others, I was elected. And so now on the board of directors, we have clear community representation. And what we don't see as an everyday user is that the choices made about technology, about product development, are extremely complex. We're in a sector that's trying to disrupt and to transform the banking world that everybody knows with a technology that's extremely changing. 10 years ago, Solana didn't exist. It's constantly changing. And therefore, to give these kinds of choices that are oh so technical to the average man or woman on the street is not the same as asking whether they should punish more. In Swiss votes, there are economic issues, but often it's more society issues. Are we going to allow marijuana and things like that? And everyone can have an opinion that's quite easy to inform. But when we're talking about a company, when it's one of two routes, and both could be good, but we need to prioritize one over another, keeping in mind the broader roadmap that also needs to remain a little bit secret, because otherwise competitors will copy. It's quite complicated. So I think that it's the very nature of the sector in which we're in, and the fact that it's very technical. If we start to ask these questions, we would be giving a lot of information to get the relevant answer. And then in the end, what we would really be doing would be give information to our competitors rather than helping Swissborg. So right now we're in a technocracy with people who are knowledgeable, who take decisions. And then we at our level, and this is something we actually do a lot, we can say what we want. And then it's for them to prioritize and do that on the basis of the roadmap and so forth. But there's a big community input. Yes, with that explanation I understand much better, and it makes sense. But I think it's very important for someone like you to say it, because I'm definitely a fan of the app. Before I discovered it, I was on other apps, and I'm not going to go into the details about exit fees, transfers, and so forth. It was a nightmare. So Swissborg was pretty much the promised land. Yes. That's where the shift happens, because you can understand the values of the people behind the company. Their goal would be to get 1 million users that would be financially free. We'll obviously have more than a million, but maybe of users, but hopefully we'll have 1 million that will be financially free, that will not have the burden on my shoulders that I mentioned earlier. Different people have different burdens. And so they try to have fair fees. They're not trying to say, oh, well, last year we made 3 billion in profits. and that money is not reinvested, which happens with other platforms where they're just in it for money. They just improve the product as little as possible, and nothing goes back to the user's pocket. They aren't transparent as to fees. They only realize them. They only realize how large they are when they exit. And they're tricky. They hide their fees. Most of these platforms, and it's difficult for us when we are very transparent and we announce our fees. It's hard to compete in that context. Yes, I think that sometimes when I get critical is in relation to an ideal, but I have to remember my experiences before Swissborg. They were really terrible. So I imagine for those who follow us, they have understood that we are fans of the app. We both also have shares in Swissborg. And that being said, everything that's being discussed here is not financial advice. And there will be a link in the description where you can download the Swissborg app and potentially earn up to 100 euros if you deposit 50 euros or more on the app when you create your account. Now we're coming to one of my last technical questions, which has to do with taxation. So I know you're not essentially a tax expert, but in France, for the time being, when you transfer or transform a crypto like Bitcoin to another crypto that follows the value of a dollar or euro currency, a stable coin, it's not considered a taxable event. Could you explain the thinking behind this rule when it was drawn up? I think that things will change. When they made this rule, I think that the French authorities didn't realize how complex the issue was, and they wanted to create an envelope, a category. You probably don't know the French scheme of equity savings plans, but that's pretty much their thinking. So I'll explain what this equity savings plan is in France. It's an envelope, a category, and you put money in it. And as long as you stay in there, there is no taxation. But once you leave it, they look at, from what you extracted, what was the percentage of capital deposited and your capital gains. And you'll be taxed potentially on these gains. So when you've had these envelopes in France, you won't pay capital gains, you'll pay other taxes. In crypto, it's similar, except that there's no plan for it. There's crypto writ large. And as I said, we're talking about maybe dozens of wallets and platforms, so you can have money spread out in many places. Their goal is to take as much money as possible from us. And so it's always up to the citizen to explain where they got the money, how they got the money, and they need to fill their tax form. And if you've forgotten something, it's your problem, and they'll come after you. They will call you dishonest, you were hiding things on purpose, and so forth. I think you've understood that I don't like these people too much. And so the system is built to be extremely complicated for the user. So long as we stay in the crypto universe and we don't go back into fiat euro currency or dollars or what have you, there is no taxation. But at some stage we'll be taxed, and in our case it's 30% in France on capital gains. But to be able to do that, you need to calculate the capital gains, and that's very complicated because you can have cryptos all over the place. So it's very discouraging, and people will ultimately say, well, I'll just pay 30% on what I take out without actually calculating the niceties, because it's very complicated. And since we had the situation, they said, so long as you stay in crypto, you're fine, and a stable coin is a crypto. So we're in the situation where we can go into an asset which is quite stable without this tax generation effect. But Europe is discussing MiCA, the Markets in Crypto Assets Regulation, and some stablecoins will be recognized at a European level as being essentially the same as a fiat currency. And therefore they will no longer be classified as crypto. They will be called crypto, which is the same as regular euros, and this will generate a tax event. And somebody could even say that if you consider Bitcoin as a currency, as some states do, in absolute terms, if you buy Bitcoin and make a profit, well, that should be dealt just like profits when you're buying and selling dollars. And if you make gains at that level, you'd have to deal with it in the same way. So if this is set up and if it's poorly drafted, as is often the case, well, then Bitcoin might be a separate case. And if you sell crypto to go into Bitcoin, that might also be taxable at some stage. So there are many changes down the road that might emerge. So you need to watch this space then. Yes. Keep abreast of the news, and then there are probably solutions to secure gains. There might be currency baskets, for example, because if you have a product that is a basket, well, there potentially you might not fall under that taxable situation. It's a potential option down the road. Thanks, Julienas. Now let's go on to the part of the interview that's slightly more personal. Can you maybe tell us a little bit about your professional background, how you got started in crypto? You already mentioned this earlier, 15 years of experience, but maybe in a more structured way. Well, I studied wealth management. I did a 2-year master's in an excellent university, the University of Auvergne in Clermont-Ferrand, which is well known, and I say hi to all alumni. And then I went to Société Générale, a French bank. I had a few branches in Paris, 5 or 6 branches. And then I went to Western Paris, where I had 2 branches. And obviously when you're talking about Western Paris, we're talking about neighborhoods that can be quite wealthy. And then I joined the private bank, where I stayed for 3 or 4 years. And I did pretty much the same thing in the same area, but with people who had more capital. And here I'm talking about people who had a minimum of €500,000 on their bank accounts in the bank. And then they can have several bank accounts. And obviously they have real estate and other things. So generally we're talking about assets, total assets at around 2 million. That's about the threshold. So that's where I suggested investment strategies, diversification strategies, and also how to structure the transfer of wealth from one generation to the next, what advisors tend to do. And then I went to their headquarters, and that's where I worked on the broader network, and I accompanied other advisors and explained the bank's products. I was the expert on the bank's financial products. And when I was still in the private bank sector, I'd already started to dip my toes into crypto. And I talked about these things to my friends, and I tried to convince people about it, because as soon as I find something that I like, I try to convince everyone. That's the way I am. And in the middle of all this, I had a friend who told me, well, there's a crypto project that's being launched that has to do with wealth management, and it's your area, and that's how I discovered Swissborg. But I was involved in crypto before then, and I had a quite bad experience, because I basically entered a Ponzi scheme where I lost my money because they weren't serious. And that was that. And I basically started the YouTube channel because before that I had a WhatsApp group where I would share with all my friends, this is the latest information, news, etc. And there's some of them who don't like to read, and they said, why can't you make voice recordings? And then I said to myself, well, if I'm going to make voice recordings, I might as well start a channel. Yes, and I think we need to wrap up the interview soon. Yes, yes. So I said, if we're going to make recordings, might as well make videos. And I was at the time that the DAO of Swissborg was being launched with the community's involvement. And I took the role of the person who presented the news. And I killed two birds with one stone because I would inform my friends on how the project progressed. And at the same time, I would spread the word, spread the gospel. Yes, I love what you do, the weekly show, your fast recap show. You give a lot of your time. You have great energy. As I said earlier, I don't understand the ins and outs of everything that you present, but it's good to at least have one's ear to the ground for these changes. Next question. So Galt is obviously a character in Ayn Rand's books, and it's also your alias. Some people might have an inkling of why you might have chosen this name, but could you explain to us? Well, when I started the YouTube channel, I was still in private banking, so I didn't want to put out my real name. It might have impacted client relations or my relationship to the bank, so I had to be anonymous. And I also called myself Julienas instead of Julien, just for the fun of it. And yes, Galt is because the ideas I have today come from Ayn Rand. I had a friend who told me about Ayn Rand. I started with The Fountainhead. It's a great novel about architecture where you follow someone who's extremely talented but who suffers the pressure of the state, the violence of competition, but dishonest competition that use the state to harm him. And that impacted me. And then there's the next novel, Atlas Shrugged, which is translated as The Strike in French also, La Grève. And there, well, just to give you Ayn Rand's story, she fled communism. She emigrated to the US, and she saw the slow arrival of dictatorship. Gulags, people being expropriated, 5 people living huddled in an apartment, and they say that's the state, you have to deal with it. So she went to the United States. She said, this is a country of freedom, it's amazing. But then she started seeing a few small laws, small changes that reminded her of the USSR. And then there were people at the time who were saying we should take on the Russian example, we should follow the Russian example. It was before the full-blown Cold War. And she said that it was a moral error to want to do that because it's like like robbing people of their money, of their assets. It's a fight against people who want to bring out the best of themselves. She is the high priestess of capitalism, if you will. She developed the theory of rational egoism. And it's not a perspective that's, I want more, I'm greedy, everything for me. Her egoism starts with self-love. You have to start by loving yourself. Before you help others, help yourself. And if you do things for yourself, if you take care of what's important for you, and it could be your children, your family, it could be your neighborhood, if you do things honestly in a spirit of justice and for your personal good, this will spread to something good for the whole of society. And all these well-intentioned measures that it's good to help this category of person, it's good to think of the widow and the orphan. Everyone agrees on those things. The real question is whether helping the widow and the orphan should be the responsibility of the individual. Should the individual be free to say, I will help? And then there is a genuine feeling of generosity that emerges and the principle of give and take. Is it like quid pro quo? No, it's different. It's give and take. For example, you're at a bar and there's a friend that says, it's my round. He gets up, he gets the round of beers. The beer is drunk. You don't expect the same friend to pay the next round. There will be somebody else in the gathering who will say, no, it's my turn. And because of that initial gift, that initial donation, there is a feeling of unfairness if we don't do the same. And this is the same thing whenever you give a gift or a donation. If we were the last one and didn't manage to pay a round, we feel guilty and we'll do it next time around, because there is this feeling of being in debt. However, by creating a system to replace free donations, you lose this notion of give and take. And the person who receives help, they don't feel this gratitude. On the contrary, there's a feeling of entitlement. And so you've destroyed this notion of generosity. So people lose control of their assets on the one hand. And on the other hand, those who receive benefits feel entitled. They don't feel in debt. So Ayn Rand explains this phenomenon of individuals who use the state for a priori good things, but this actually creates a chain reaction of pernicious reactions, and a lot of people just quit. They want to step out. They throw in the towel. They say, I'm going to leave. You're not going to get anything more out of me. And that's how you have this character, John Galt, who starts to approach luminaries, writers, painters, but also entrepreneurs, people who are talented at whatever they do, telling them, haven't you had enough of being taken advantage of? Join me and let's leave. And you see, after all this, what is the impact when all the brains of the world leave? It's also manual workers, anybody skilled, when all the skilled people leave, and how the state finds itself in a position that it has to ever increasingly tax people and to be even more aggressive on that front. That's what happened in the Soviet Union, and that is what happens in that book that's set in the United States, and you see the whole process unfold. And obviously it touched me, and that's why I have that alias. Yes, and for those who haven't read her books, they might think these books are a bit boring, but no, she weaves them in very colorful stories that I highly recommend. Julien, thank you so much for your time. I love this closing because we started talking about quality of life, big philosophical questions, and we're closing on something similar. Thanks so much for your time and for your hard work. I wish you all the best. I also wish all the best to our investments. And if ever you're in Geneva or the Geneva area, please don't hesitate to send me an email and maybe we can meet for real. Yes, of course, with great pleasure. And I wish you the best of success in everything you do. And it's been a pleasure for me to be on the show, and I say hi to everyone in your community. Yes, we'll do that, Julienas. Thank you. Bye-bye.